We're back for Your Ears Only. I'm David Alpern.
And I'm Catherine Herzog with this news quote. Of course, it's easier if you hold an Olympic Games in the middle of nowhere. That was Britain's Prime Minister David Cameron after Mitt Romney, who ran the Salt Lake City Olympics, questioned London's readiness for the 2012 Games. In another gaffe, Romney spoke about his meeting with the chief of MI6, Britain's foreign intelligence agency, typically not mentioned in public. Now this.
Life's a race that I'm gonna win. Yes, I'm gonna win. And I'll light the fuse, and I'll never lose. And I choose to survive, whatever it takes. You won't pull ahead, I'll keep up the pace. And I'll reveal my strength to the whole human race.
Gonna win whatever it takes is the central message of Survival, official song of the London Olympics, and in many other arenas of athletic competition, for better and worse. That was underscored last week by the elimination of 9 athletes with doping issues just 48 hours before the Games began, and by the penalties leveled against the mighty Penn State football machine made famous, now infamous, by the late coach Joe Paterno and former assistant Jerry Sandusky, now convicted in a shocking child sex abuse scandal.
To consider developments in London and Pennsylvania, for Your Ears Only, we're happy to be joined again by Frank Deford, senior contributing writer at Sports Illustrated and weekly commentator on NPR. His new memoir is Over Time, My Life as a Sportswriter, from Atlantic Monthly Press. Welcome back to our program.
It's nice to be back with you all.
Let's start with Penn State and the sanctions the NCAA imposed on it last week, including a $60 million fine, a 4-year ban on playing any bowl games, scholarship losses, and elimination of all of Paterno's football victories since 1998. Did they go too far?
Oh, I think you could argue on the margins, but I think approximately it was a fair punishment. There are some people who think that the team shouldn't be allowed to play this year. And I wouldn't argue if that were the case, but I think it was a very substantial and a very fair penalty.
Are student athletes with no connection to the Sandusky scandal or the university's complicity being punished unfairly?
Well, they are, but I don't think they call it collateral damage in the military, and I just don't think you could punish the football program without hurting some of the players as well. Now, the NCAA did say that they could transfer to another school, which under the antiquated NCAA rules you can't do without sitting out a year. These guys can go and be on another team next week. So in that sense, I think that they were treated very fairly.
You've written about the psychology that apparently led to Paterno's protection of Sandusky. Is that a natural extension of win whatever it takes?
Not only win whatever it takes, but protect the Penn State program whatever it takes. I think that was... You got to protect the program first before you could win. So I imagine the two are very much connected, but there's no question that it was that kind of thinking that led Paterno and the other Penn State officials to turn a blind eye to Sandusky and his heinous activities.
Paterno's statue has been taken off campus. What about his legacy beyond the record of wins that's now been erased, moving him way down from America's winningest coach?
Oh, David, I don't think there's any way you can say but that he will be remembered primarily for this. I think that as time goes on, the scandal will fade a little bit, and he'll be remembered as a very good coach, which is what he was. But notwithstanding, when Joe Paterno's name is mentioned 20 or 50 years down the road, it's this that people are going to remember.
Well, in a way, you suggest the Penn State scandal is only the most extreme form of the contradictions rife in big-time college football. Talk about that.
Well, I mean, this is an exception. Yes, there may be a pedophile on some staff somewhere, but the problems of big-time football and basketball, the program is too big. That's what happened in Penn State. But the corruption is of an entirely different nature than the sexual angle. The corruption is in the recruiting. It is in letting athletes who are not capable of the studies going to school. It is letting them get grades that they don't deserve. It is under the table payments and coordinate to that, it is not paying them fairly when everybody else is getting money.
Let's talk about something more fun, the Olympics, which began with the Queen as a James Bond girl parachuting into the opening ceremony. What did you think of that production?
Well, it is more fun, certainly, than states. So I'm glad we've made a right turn here. But those opening ceremonies are always so hokey. Now, yeah, it might have cost $42 million, but they go through three phases. All those shows, the same thing. First they have the hokey stuff in which you see something about the country that's putting them on. Then you have the athletes march in interminably wearing terrible clothes, and then you have sort of the pagan religious ceremonies that follow, and they're all pretty much the same hokey stuff.
Of course, you admit that those opening ceremonies for all of that have a bigger audience than the actual games themselves.
They got great ratings. Extraordinary ratings on NBC, but it does say something about the Olympics that they're really more spectacle, I think, than any other sporting event. The fact that the opening ceremonies and the closing ceremonies really get more attention than the games themselves. And the Olympics are different in that way. So much more passion is connected in whatever country you're in to people's favorite team sports, to who they're rooting for, and you simply don't find that in the Olympics.
Do you think, on balance, the games bring the world together in appreciation of individual excellence, or just stoke up this sense of nationalistic competition?
You haven't had the real nationalism since the Soviet Union was holding sway, and the U.S., our way of life versus their way of life. I don't think it's so much nationalism as just rooting for your own guy. It's not so much you're rooting against somebody else. But yes, the idea that this is all sort of brotherhood and fellowship is nonsense. They're games, they're sports, and people cheer for their guy, and the athletes are trying just as hard to win as they are in any other competition.
Frank Deford is a senior contributing writer at Sports Illustrated and a weekly commentator on NPR. His new memoir is Over Time, My Life as a Sports Writer, from Atlantic Monthly Press.
Quote from the news, around the 3. That was General Keith Alexander, head of the National Security Agency, and a new cyber command, rating the U.S. on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of preparedness against a 17-fold increase in cyber attacks on the U.S. infrastructure between 2009 and 2011.
Next, AIDS progress and protests. For your ears only.